All right. Welcome. My name is Allison Boles. I am the Education and Community Programming Manager for La Jolla Music Society. Thank you all for joining us today for our encounter, From Student to Professional. As we begin, you'll notice that your audio is muted and your video is turned off. This will help our discussion go smoothly, and it will avoid having people talk over each other. We will have a portion later on where we will be able to ask you to unmute if you'd like to ask some questions, so you can be prepared for that. I also wanted to mention before we really get into things that we are socially distanced here. Jazmín is joining us from Los Angeles, and those of us at the Conrad are spaced in separate areas, which is why we're not wearing our masks, with the exception of Tessa and Michael, who have been tested. They are part of our musicians pod, and they are from the same household. So you guys can be as cozy as you like. So our plan today is to run this webinar in two parts. The first is just a conversation among our panelists here, who I'll introduce in a moment. And the second will be a Q&A, where we invite you, our participants, to join us. And you can participate in a couple of different ways. You can either do that through the chat, or later you'll be able to press the raise your hand button, and we'll be able to unmute you so you can ask your question directly. Most of you are probably familiar with Zoom, but let's talk quickly about how to use the chat function. First, you will find it either at the top center or bottom center of your screen, depending on which view of Zoom you're using. If that button isn't visible, you may need to click More, or the three dots, and then select Chat from the menu. I'm joined today by La Jolla Music Society's Artistic Director, Leah Rosenthal, who is graciously monitoring the chat for us. She'll keep track of our questions, and during the second portion, she'll join us to ask as many as we can get through. You can either send a chat to her directly through all panelists, or you can send it to all panelists and attendees for public comment. Let's talk for a moment about artist development. And while I do this, I hope you'll please join us in testing out the chat function. Please type hello, give your instrument, a little shout out to our artists who are here, anything you like. Let's see how we use that function. LJMS is committed to artist development, and we provide opportunities throughout the year for young artists to perform, to have master classes. And each summer, we usually invite 7 different artists to come as fellowship artists to kind of support them as they transition from the academic world into the professional world. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we were unable to do that this year, but it gave us a great opportunity to connect in this way with young artists like you. So I hope you leave our session today feeling energized, inspired, and really confident in your dreams. All right, it looks like our chat is up and running. So I'll take a moment to introduce our panelists. From our festival artists, we have Tessa Lark and Michael Thurber here. And from LA, we have Jazmín Morales. And Jazmín actually worked at La Jolla Music Society when I first started here over 5 years ago. Now she is currently the Assistant Director of Colburn School Center for Innovation and Community Impact. And she's also on faculty at USC's Thornton School of Music's Arts Leadership Program. So let's dive in, and actually, Jazmín, why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be back at SummerFest, even in this new capacity. So as Allison mentioned, my name is Jazmín Morales. I'm the Assistant Director of Colburn Center for Innovation and Community Impact. And my role there is at the intersection of community engagement and career development. And our center serves all areas of Colburn. So the community school, which has over 2,000 students from early childhood through high school graduation, 2 pre-college academies, 1 in music, 1 in dance, and our Conservatory of Music, which is 125 fully endowed spaces full room board tuition in downtown LA, and the school is right across the street from Walt Disney Concert Hall. So my role there is really designed to help students think about what they want to do with their gifts and help them enact meaningful change in the world through their artistic practice by helping them discover what it is about music performance that compels them to do it in the first place, and working from that place to build a career that can be fulfilling and sustainable over time, even in this rapidly shifting cultural environment. You're muted, Allison.
That was bound to happen at some point during. Tessa and Michael, would you share a little bit more about what you do and who you are?
Yeah, I will start by introducing Michael Thurber.
Oh, I like
here.
that. That's fun. Okay.
Yeah, and a few of us here on this chat have From the Top in common, which is a wonderful program for pre-college classical musicians, and that's actually how Michael and I met. So I met Michael as an incredible composer, and it turns out he's also an unbelievable bass player who has been formally trained in both classical and jazz styles of music, and composes also jazz inspired, American roots inspired music, pop music. He writes for musical theater as well. He was for a time in the Late Show band for Stephen Colbert's show. Just a man of many incredible talents. It's hard to pick the one he does best because he does them all so amazingly well. But Michael is here playing bass with me and with other folks, the classic Schubert-Trout quintet, but also music of his own that we get to play. So a man of many talents, and you've also created your own YouTube channel for a little while, CDZA. So Michael also knows how to get unique and personal projects off the ground and how to make those succeed. So I feel very lucky to live in the same house as Michael and get inspired by him every day.
Wow. Okay. So I got to try to one up that. That was really nice. Tessa is amazing. She's also a person of many talents. She just got nominated for Best Classical Soloist at the Grammys last year, which is really exciting. And what's so cool about it, I think, rather than just, getting nominated for a Grammy is the honor of a lifetime, no matter what you do, but it was a specific concerto that was written just for her by a really prominent American composer named Michael Thurber. And he met Tessa and was so impressed with her playing that he asked if he could write this piece for her. So it wasn't even something that she started. He came to her. And it was a bluegrass-inspired concerto because Tessa grew up in Kentucky and actually played fiddle and mandolin before she got into playing serious classical repertoire. And it's really cool because in her career now, which is something I hope she talks about today, she's managed to really straddle those worlds and bring her love of American music, and specifically the bluegrass fiddle tradition, into her classical performances. So she's, touring around the country as a soloist. She's played with, orchestras all around the country and the world. She's given recitals everywhere. She just recorded a beautiful recital for Cal Arts that's, a presenter out here in California, and has won about every competition you can think of, and plays a fancy violin, and it's just a pretty big fancy deal. So
Haven't won the hot dog eating competition.
Yeah, that's tonight.
Still
we'll be there
working on
tonight
that.
at the hot dog eating competition. Wish us luck.
That's awesome. Hopefully that'll be live on YouTube for everyone to view.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, since you mentioned From the Top, I'd love to talk a little bit more about kind of all of our connection with that. I actually wore my Music is Powerful Stuff t-shirt on my walk this morning.
Wow.
And we did a taping here at the Conrad last April. It was about 10 days after we opened our new hall. And it was such an incredible experience. And Jazmín was there with Vijay Gupta as the host, helping run that community engagement. So maybe one of you can talk a little bit about the work that From the Top does and kind of the way it promotes young artists.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I mean, Jazmín, you probably have a lot to say about this too. Yeah. From the Top is very unique. It's not only an NPR show, but every city that it travels to, it sort of sets up shop and does all of these arts leadership workshops. So any young people that are on the show also learn a lot about how to organize and how to get music into their local community. And in the future, I don't want to say anything that's top secret that as a board member, but in the future, I think that there's going to be a lot more of that activity as the organization evolves in light of COVID and just in light of the world right now. So that's always been a really powerful part of it because I feel like the kids leave the show having a better idea of what they can do locally. And also it gives them an opportunity to talk about whatever's important to them on a platform like National Public Radio, which even in the day of podcasts is still actually has a lot of listenership. So, we can get stories of young people out there. They can talk about what's on their mind outside of just music. And that's a really empowering experience. It was for Tessa and I, at least when we were young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I do the arts leadership and community engagement programming for a lot of the West Coast tapings, and now that things have gone digital, I've done a few of our first online community engagement projects. One of which actually was through Seacrest Studios, based out in Colorado, where we zoomed in to perform for a children's hospital. And they could call in to ask questions of the performers. And so that's been a really awesome sort of exercise in reimagining community engagement for a post-COVID world, getting to get that sandbox through From the Top and work with our courageous young artists who are just willing to dive into the complete unknown of this new world. And I'm always just so blown away by the level of maturity and vulnerability that these young artists bring to our work together, and I think really speaks to the spirit of this new generation of young artists coming up, and the dedication and curiosity that they all have about how they as artists can contribute to the world.
Tessa, how did being on From the Top kind of change your trajectory as a young artist?
Well, as is being implied right now, I was trained, I started with the Suzuki method, and then I went to pre-college in Cincinnati, where a lot of the focus is on solo playing. So violin solos, concertos, and that sort of thing. And of course, excellence in performance. But what From the Top really does, which I think is crucial, and like you're saying, you see a lot more in the newer generation, is that that your instrumental, technical, musical excellence is not separate from being a leader in your community and being involved in that way. And for me, it was a little bit separate until I went to From the Top and I saw that both inform the other. And so in that way, from then on, after being part of From the Top, and now as a co-host and creative, every day, I wake up and when I'm playing my violin, I'm playing my music, I'm always thinking as well as how this can help contribute to society or help in any way possible, and all of the healthcare workers, everybody who is really on the front lines now and doing essential work. That is a different thing. But I think once you have all of those essentials, music can really provide something pretty magnificent. And it also just helps me feel better about what I do when I do feel a little helpless sometimes and think, gosh, I wish I could help in another way. But the truth is that you really can with music and From the Top. That's such a focus, but they never actually veer away from musical excellence. You can have both. And it was a misconception for me, honestly, until I went to From the Top and saw that it all comes together in a full package.
That's really beautiful. And Jazmín, I know that you're doing similar work at Colburn with the Fortissimo program. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so Fortissimo is a program that I piloted at Colburn 2.5 years ago, which is a leadership development program for young women of color in classical music. And it was really born of my own experience as a young woman of color in classical music who didn't really have people who looked like me in my network, in my orchestra, on stages that I was watching and admiring. And I wanted to create a program that could change the trajectory of young women in my position, and help connect them to mentors in the field who are already out there doing the work, who they may not have ready access to, as well as curriculum. Actually, a lot of the curriculum that I've done with From the Top, I've piloted with Fortissimo. So giving them kind of early access to questions and conversations that I usually have with conservatory students later in their career, but bringing them to younger students to ask earlier in their development, that hopefully will help guide them over time to artistic careers that make sense to them, but that the world also needs. And so that's been just a total joy and delight to create that curriculum. And actually, last month, Colburn finally publicly announced that the program will go national. So we'll be recruiting nationally for an intensive, yes, thank you, next fall, where young women from all over the country will get to come to Colburn during the school year, get trial lessons, stay in the dorms, get a fully immersive conservatory experience, so they can really visualize themselves taking up space in a place like Colburn or another conservatory, and get them acquainted with what that life is and what they can achieve there. So I'm really excited about the growth of Fortissimo.
That is absolutely incredible. I had no idea that you were scaling up like that. So congratulations.
Yes. Thank you.
Really great. I mean, that kind of seeing yourself and that representation and that mentorship, I think, is such a key component. And that's something really that we've found, in conversations that I've had with past fellowship artists and with artists on our Discovery series, like having a mentor, having someone that you can look up to is so crucial to making that transition from the academic career into the professional world. So Michael or Tessa, have you had any experience with mentors yourself, or have you served as a mentor to young students?
Oh my gosh, I mean, mentorship is what it's all about in music. I think there are few things anymore that actually come traditionally with a teacher that you have once a week for almost 2 decades. And in a way, it's been bizarre being on this professional pursuit for the last, I guess I graduated 8 years ago from college, and I even had a stint back at school because I couldn't handle being without a mentor. So I've been seeking out different inspirations for my whole life. But the beautiful thing is that you find mentors for your entire life. The people that I look up to, they also have their own heroes that they seek advice from for the rest of their lives. So I have, all of my violin teachers that I studied with are major inspirations to me. Even the folks that we're here with in La Jolla, I've actually known almost all of them except for Enon, who I'm meeting for the first time here, and he's quickly become an inspiration of mine. And I think the beauty of music is that we are taught to always have our ears and our hearts and souls open. And so in that way, when we're in chamber music rehearsals, Enon has, quickly become a mentor to me in his sound production. So that's, I guess for me, that's where my mind is now in terms of mentorship. And I know for you, you have a bunch of different types of
I think keeping in mind, everybody that's listening right now, I would say, and I feel like this connects very much with what Jazmín is saying as well, just try to find people that you really respect and that bring you joy and that you feel seen and understood around.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most important thing. And anybody that you feel like understands you and sees you, and is supportive of you, those people are going to be mentors, like whether they're your age or whether they're older, you know. And I also think being around people that are really inspiring to you, like seek out people that are inspiring to you or that are interested in things that you are interested in, you know, and you can start to kind of build a tribe that's based around your passion and your interests and the kind of life that you want to have. And I think that's really the most important thing. I mean, whether you're a young person out there right now that feels like you haven't seen enough people that look like you in this specific career or in any others in America, or you're somebody like me who's seen yourself but might have other challenges or things that you think are impossible, just get around people that aren't daunted by those things that seem impossible, you know, because they're really not. I mean, I feel like especially nowadays in 2020, we're learning more and more like anything is possible if you decide that you want to do it. And I don't mean that in a corny way, like I mean that in a very real way. And so I think getting around people that understand that and aren't trying to stand in the way of that is really important. And no matter what it is, there are those people that exist.
That's
like
true, yeah.
You might hit some resistance, but there's always going to be those people that are like, I think it's great. Like, go for it. You know, those are the people you want to hang around with, you know?
Yeah. You know, I don't want to thwart our screen thwart this whole conversation, but Jazmín, what you've said a couple of times has struck me so strongly, even now when you're saying to always remind yourself why you got into music in the first place, what is sincere to you, and how does the world need it? Because what's true to you, the world needs. You know, I am a big believer that whatever is your honest pursuit, whatever just makes your fire burn from within, that is what the world needs. And so what you're saying in terms of finding mentors that inspire you, I've found sometimes that you know, having a bunch of different mentors is actually ideal, especially now when it's hard to break through the noise, and we all are very complex beings and have many, many diverse interests. And so one mentor might be on their own path and they might not actually agree with something that you're also interested in. But I think if you're always following, like you say, if something strikes you as inspiring, then go for it. And you don't actually need the approval of another separate mentor to also be inspired by something else. And I've had to learn that and remind myself of that every day. Actually, Jazmín, every morning. I'm just like, you know, I don't want to practice my violin, and I think, okay, why am I here in the first place? You know, and the world needs it. It's a great question to remind ourselves of every single day. But with our like massive range of interests that we have, like playing bluegrass and playing classical music, I have had to also remind myself of what you're encouraging, is that it's okay to have many different mentors and inspirations, as long as it's true to you, and to not force inspiration where it's not coming for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Jazmín, have you had any particular mentors yourself that have inspired you to where you are today?
Let's see, I have one on this call here right now, Leah Rosenthal. Yeah, I've been blessed to have many, especially particularly women mentors in my life who have really inspired me to think even bigger than I thought I could. So I'm a participant in a program right now called Sphinx Lead. And if you're not familiar with Sphinx, anybody on this call, they're really doing some amazing work in, they are really the champions of diversity in classical music. And they began as a competition for Black and Latinx string players and have since grown to affect so many areas of the field, including our orchestral auditions and now administration. And so I'm part of their inaugural cohort of the Sphinx Lead program. And so we're a cohort of 10 Black and Latinx administrators from throughout the country. And through that program, I was actually matched with a mentor to work with during my time in Sphinx Lead, and that's Deborah Borda, who is the president of the New York Phil, formerly of the LA Phil, who in my, when I first had the initial conversation of like, who might be a mentor fit for me, I felt like, oh, maybe this person or that person. And Aaron Dworkin, who's a former president of Sphinx, said to me, he's like, well, what about like someone like Deborah Borda? And I was like, Deborah Borda would never give me the time of day. She's the queen of the actual universe. Like, I don't think she has the time in her calendar to like take a call from little me, right? And little did I know that she was actually really excited to work with me and has been such a generous and inspirational figure in my life since then. And, just having that, even that conversation with Aaron, who challenged me to think bigger about what my capacity is, or who might want to work with me, or, who would even give me the time of day, right? Has really opened my eyes to that. But only to say, of course, Deborah is a huge inspiration. Leah has been another. Every day I think about Michelle Obama and what she teaches me and what she means in the world and how I aspire to be her. So in a faraway, inspirational mentorship world, she will also one day take my call.
I can see that happening. I think it's just a matter of time. To kind of switch gears sort of abruptly, I was wondering, and Jazmín, maybe you're the best person to start off this answer or this question. What do you think is missing right now from a typical high school or college experience for music students? What should they be seeking out to really set them up for success in this industry?
Well, that's tough because there's such a huge variance in what a high school music, education really looks like. It depends on where you are, what your background is, what you have access to. But I would say that in my experience in the world of music education, especially when we're talking about really high level training, often what is left out of that conversation are more broad discussions about our collective vision for success, right? Often as classical musicians, our closest mentor is often our private teacher, right? Our studio teacher. And in my experience, usually studio teachers who work with high achieving young musicians are very good about making their potential career trajectories known and working towards them at a very early age so they can achieve them, right? So if you're a 14-year-old who loves playing in your orchestra and your teacher thinks that it could be a career for you in the future, of course you're going to be working on your orchestral excerpts really early, and that's going to be, but it's easy then to have tunnel vision from that point, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to win my job in this orchestra 12 years from now, and that's going to make me happy forever, right? And working solely towards that vision of success. Or I'm going to be a soloist and be signed to this label and be presented by X, Y, and Z by the time I'm this age, right? So hyper-focusing on these really narrow visions of what that career will look like. And so I think the earlier we can introduce conversations about ways that musicians can exist in the world outside of traditional career paths, and encouraging more experimentation, cross-collaboration early on, I think will allow those students to enter the field and higher education with a more open mind, with more curiosity and willingness to experiment with whatever resources are available to them once they get there.
Michael and Tessa, you guys are so broad in what your interests are and your passions and your pursuits. Is that something that was really taught to you, or that you just kind of developed on your own? And how do you kind of keep going in that and keep your curiosity, as Jazmín was saying?
Well, for me personally, I really connect with what you were saying, Jazmín, because I don't know how many of you out there what all of your relationships to music are. They're all very different. So I will tell my story in a very brief, condensed way. And I would say if it resonates with you, great. And if it doesn't, it was different, at least it's something to kind of compare your own story to. But I think that there'll be a lot of commonalities. So for me, I was not in a musical family. And I lived in a very rural town in the Midwest. And so there were no professional musicians in my family, and there were no major orchestras or jazz clubs or any, sort of cultural centers within a 30-minute drive of where I grew up. But I got very interested in music through skateboard videos, actually, because I was really into skating. And it turns out that skateboarders have really great taste in music. And so through that, I decided that I really loved music and I wanted to pursue it. And this is the main point that I want to get to. The only way that was presented to me to pursue music was in school. And the only music being taught in school was classical music. And so it's very interesting because I never would have gotten into classical music except that I wanted to be a professional musician. And the only path that was shown to me in my specific life and the way that it went down was that if you get serious about a classical instrument, then you can actually go to college for that. And then you can actually get a job doing that. And it's so interesting because, when I finally got to Juilliard, where I went to college, I had a bit of an existential meltdown because as I started to kind of really become an adult and ask bigger questions of myself and my life, I started to realize, I'm not a classical musician. I don't even know what that means. It's just that at that time in America, which is sort of changing now, which I think is a wonderful thing, that like European classical tradition was the thing that academia was built around. But I grew up, my first musical experiences were listening to Stevie Wonder and Earth, Wind and Fire and Michael Jackson and pop music, American pop music, and specifically funk music. And I was really, really interested in jazz and became really good friends with a jazz pianist at Juilliard from New Orleans that's now very prominent, and learned so much from him and would go to jam sessions with him. And so, connecting it to the mentor thing, I think I started to realize, man, I'm only here because of the way that my life went down, but there's actually a lot of ways to have a musical life. And there's such a rich tradition of American music, with jazz, with fiddle music, with hip hop, with blues, with popular music, that's so important to our country culturally and in the story of our people, but also just incredibly expressive, high caliber art, and I really think that's all valid. And so, I started to try to be around people that were interested in all of those things. And then a career sort of just happened as a result of those interests and those passions. It was sort of a side product, but I think that's, to kind of go back to your original question, Allison, like, I think this idea of, maybe what's missing or what's not, maybe what I would say to all of you is, whatever music you're interested in, go with that. And like, if you're really into hip hop, that is just as legitimate of an art form as classical music. It's just different. It's very different tradition, it's actually more similar than it is different if you really get into both of those styles of music, but that's okay, and so if you have an outlet to do that, go do that. Or if you really love playing Bach, which I do still too, that's great too, you know what I mean? But I would say you have a lot more agency in filling in those gaps than maybe you realize. And especially you guys now than we do, because you can go on YouTube and you can learn how to play any instrument or any style of music from very talented people, especially right now in COVID. So that's what I would say is, like, whatever is lacking or whatever you don't have exposure to, try to just go with what you have around you, and what you're interested in.
What he said.
I was a little rambly, sorry.
No, I don't really have anything to add to that. I mean, I just came, it's funny because Michael and I play together because of our similar broad interests, but we actually came at it from different angles. And I really come from a classical background and classical training, and I've sort of experienced it firsthand. What you're sort of getting at, which is that, you know, like one teacher once, I played some bluegrass for this classical teacher, and their response to it was cute, you know, and I was a little devastated because I loved the music a lot, and they just kind of, you know, tossed it off as something that wasn't valid. And we have this discussion a lot that classical music is extremely sophisticated, complex music, as is jazz music, but that doesn't inherently make it better than anything else. And I feel like that that just needs to be said aloud, because I think when we do have different musical interests, certain generations of mentors might look at that in a certain way, but it's still okay, and it's very valid, and it can be as high quality or as involved a pursuit as you want it to be. And it took me a little while to be comfortable with that, and to sort of not give my attention to naysayers when I was playing bluegrass or putting other styles of music in my programs. And sure enough, it's slowly becoming actually quite a popular thing in classical music. And time again, audience members will always, you know, come up and say, you know, I love that bluegrass number you played. And American music has always influenced the, you know, quote, classical music that's been written now, and folk music since the dawn of time has inspired all great composers of the past. So that's just the one thing I would add, I guess, to what you were saying, is that, you know, there are all sorts of different ways to have a broad and varied pursuit in career in music. And the way I approached it is I kind of started in one lane and then branched out, and Michael sort of had many lanes that have come together into a center. And so there are a lot of ways to go about it. And I'd say also, if your pursuit has been pretty straight ahead, I don't think you should worry about trying to add something or be something else. Like, Jazmín, what you said, I think is so important. Like, it must be sincere, whatever you do. And, you know, if you only feel comfortable playing Bach, then be a Bach expert.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
going to
like,
be amazing. If
there's
that's what
nothing
you're
wrong with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that's what your calling is, then it's going to make a great impact in the world. But if it's not, don't feel pressure to do that, because it's like supposed to be the thing that you're supposed to do.
Jazmín, have you had any similar experiences? I know you excel in classical and mariachi music. Have you felt that sort of dismissal that Tessa was talking about at any point? And how do you combat that as a young artist?
Yes, I certainly did. And I think that also really, so I actually studied ethnomusicology as an undergrad because I had so many, because I had curiosity about so many different styles of music. One of which is mariachi, which is my family's tradition. My dad was a professional mariachi, but was also a conservatory trained classical guitarist. And so in my mind, those things always made sense together. Like, of course, I know conservatory trained Mexicans who play mariachi. But when, you know, as a young woman of color, again, growing up in a predominantly white area, I did get a lot of, you know, pushback from my teachers, who would comment on how, you know, mariachi would destroy my pristine technique, or like that I played like a Mexican, or like, you know, they would only give me music composed by like Lalo and Sarasate. And so, yeah, I think that really, first of all, made me feel like maybe I didn't belong in a place like in the classical world, but also helped me see the limited lens through which many classical musicians and pedagogues were doing this work, because again, I was curious about music as a global phenomenon, right? As something that every culture has. And so I, you know, knew early on that I wanted to move in a direction that would allow me to study all of those cultures and see what differences and similarities we had, and how we can use music as a tool for whatever our desired outcomes are. But yeah, certainly I think it's been, I've experienced that the effects of the small-mindedness that can sometimes come up in our field. But I do also think that that's really rapidly changing now, and there is less room for things like that to happen. And I think people are also just becoming more aware of these sort of unspoken structures that we've operated within. That is, classical music is the highest possible art form, right? It is like classical music is close to God, and therefore we must have a sense of reverence towards that. And that, but the flip side of that is other musics are not as great or good as classical music, and they're less valued, and people who play them are not as educated. And so challenging all of these assumptions that have really been pervasive in the field, and re-examining that worldview to allow more people to not just participate authentically in classical traditions, but for those lines to become increasingly blurred, and for creativity to organically emerge from that. I think it has been really awesome to see unfold.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that really can come from sticking to yourself and knowing, again, why you were drawn to this and what inspires you, and just being true to who you are. Absolutely. Well, I think we can open up to some questions right now. Leah, do you want to join us here on screen? Hello.
Hello. It's like I pop out of the abyss. So one question that came through to all panelists that I saw was, what online music streaming service is the most supportive for young emerging musicians? Anyone know? And then I have a follow-up question to that as well.
Not many.
Yeah.
Not many of them are supportive.
Your own website.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, Bandcamp, I feel like, is something that a lot of people use for selling full albums. And especially in COVID, they've been trying to do, a lot of show their support to artists in a way that I think a lot of the other streaming platforms have not. So if you're in high school and you have a record that you're about to put out, I personally think Bandcamp is a great place to do it. Spotify certainly has a lot of traffic. So if you're trying to do like the whole playlist thing, depending on what style of music you make and what you're trying to do with it all, that can be a way to get exposure. But even there, I mean, playlists are, even if you get on a big one, you might see a big jump in numbers on your song for a week or two. But as soon as that playlist gets refreshed, it's gone again, because the nature of playlisting is that some people are really, really interested in what's on there, but most people put it on while they're driving or they're at work. And so you're not necessarily really getting a lot of fans from all of those plays, even though the number is going up. So I would be weary of like just understanding what that all means when you get into it, just so that you can be clear about it. Because I think the most important thing is that whatever platform you wind up on, you're really trying to build a coherent following of people that really like you and are really going to buy your music and follow you and check out what you're up to. But I think Bandcamp is a great place to start. That's the short answer.
Do you think, this is just my own personal question, do you think with COVID and live performances not being possible, that sort of digital performance will continue when things get back to normal as well, and will continue to be sort of a supportive or a platform for people that aren't necessarily playing at Carnegie or at LA Phil, but do you think that people will still want to, especially classical music, consume it through this digital way? Or I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And it's funny. Most of my favorite artists, or many of my favorite artists, I only know exclusively from their recordings and online videos. Most of them I discovered online or from recordings. And with all of these festivals going online now, there's just such a broad reach around the world of exposure. And I know as musicians, we've been discussing pretty much every night, you know, like, oh, are people ever going to come back to the live concert hall because now we have these videos? And honestly, the damage of that question has already kind of been done. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's been an issue for a long time, these free recordings, and do people value live music anymore? But I think it's a great thing to have music recorded and available for those who can't see it, and it might sort of entice somebody to, when they're in that location, to come and see the performance live. And I think it's also just a separate art form to record live performances as opposed to just being there live. It's a completely different experience. My question that I would put out actually to you all is, you know, putting value on our music and performance with these streaming platforms. That's always the question for me, because, you know, it can be found for free. And so that's the thing that I'm not sure about. Are these live streams going to still have a paywall, or how is that going to, you know, like, there's just a lot of uncertainty
well, I know when I was talking to Enon once about repertoire too, if you're playing you're basically your entire recital that you could have planned for your upcoming performance, if you have each piece online streaming somewhere, then where they can just access all of your works prior to your live performance, and then there's sort of nothing left for that excitement of seeing him play the Schumann, if they can just access everything online before they go.
Yeah. So it's, and I guess that's also like choose your path, because I think there is a really beautiful mystique that one could create if they just they choose not to use these free platforms, you know, and you can only access it in a certain way. But then also it's just much faster to gain exposure if you do hit a Spotify playlist. So it just, I suppose, depends on your brand and vision of brand. And that kind of goes back to, Jazmín, what you were talking about in terms of just creating your goals and your pursuits in high school. And I wish I had done that a little bit more, or that was clear, because in high school you have to just take all the, you know, your science, your math classes, your whatever, but they're like, no one's telling you how to plan and how to like create yourself, and branding is so important. But yeah, I feel like people will put the value they give to something, or they will value the art, the music making as much as they, you know, spend on it, you know. So
right.
they're
I agree.
like, so
Jazmín, have you seen any, sorry, Leah, have you seen any creative solutions coming from your students kind of in this digital world, and what are they doing to reach into that?
Well, they're not my students, but I do work with them a lot at Colburn, an ensemble called the Westerlies. They're a brass quartet, and they blew my mind on Facebook Live the other day when they demonstrated a new software that one of the members created that eliminates the audio lag on Zoom. And so they were playing on Zoom through like a Logic or something, and they did like a clapping exercise to set, like, to make sure that the sound was aligned, and then they played live as a quartet together on Zoom, which I had like just not yet seen. And I guess there's like a new Zoom update coming out that we'll see how it will solve that latency issue. But it was like, my mind was actually blown watching it, like watching them like unsynchronized clapping on screen, but hearing it all in real time, like right on the beat. Was just amazing to me. And so like now we're having them come work with our faculty to see like how we can build that out for real-time lessons. And so, you know, people have just gotten, I think, really creative about how they can remain connected literally through this time, and how they can continue to make music together when, you know, we can't be in the same room. So yeah, I think it's forced people to be really innovative and resilient in that way. But to the question of monetizing live stream, which I think everyone has been wrestling with right now. I heard Audrey Bergauer, formerly of the California Symphony, now she's like at San Francisco Conservatory, speak on the subject, and she mentioned a few things that that really resonated with me, which was if the content is of extremely high quality, if it is not readily available in the marketplace, and if it's differentiated from what's out there, then there's a precedent, right, to pay for that. But on the other side of that, I also think that having it for free, even if there is a live performance attached to it later on, is still almost useful for audiences to get acquainted with the pieces, with the artists and their style before coming into the concert hall. I know especially for classical audiences who tend to be very studious and voracious consumers of information, I think that there's a place for both monetized and unmonetized live.
So question for all of you, how has the role of the musician changed? Let's say from 30 years ago until now, and more specifically about expectations of the musician off the stage. And so when young musicians are going into school, and Jazmín, I'd be curious to know what are the professors there teaching them about how, their life outside of the concert stage, and sort of if Tessa and Michael, you have been surprised at how much more has been asked of you than just performance.
Yeah, well, for me, in our area, we have to do a lot of that, lead a lot of those discussions about what happens outside. Their studio teachers are responsible for their, technical and artistic outcomes, but we, in a lot of ways, become responsible for their actual career outcomes. And we're working towards integrating as much as possible those conversations, but I think they still live kind of in silos. But that being said, I think it is becoming more and more apparent, especially to faculty, the level of diversification of skill set that is required of a 21st century musician, beyond just showing up to your union gig, playing Beethoven and packing up and going home. That's just no longer the norm. More and more orchestras are requiring community engagement and educational participation from all new members, and just in general, I think especially younger musicians are just very interested in doing that work already. And so I think an entrepreneurial mindset, a portfolio style career is becoming a lot more necessary for young musicians to have the tools to navigate, and just I think a broader idea of what that career can look like allows them to get there a little sooner.
Absolutely. Tessa, Michael, anything to add?
No, I totally agree. I think I'm really interested to see what all of you on this call do. I mean, I think all of these conversations, I hope they feel very empowering for you and not daunting or boring or anything, because to me, what it all comes down to is that you guys are really the ones that are going to figure this out. I mean, this is a really, really unprecedented time. And I know that word is, you hear it every other sentence now, but it's just the truth. And so many of these things that we're figuring out, with online performance, with streaming, with even just the idea of unions, even outside of music, just what does that mean in the country right now? Like all these ways of organizing ourselves. Do we have offices anymore? Do we not need that? There are so many things changing at lightning speed. And I think while all of us on this call are sort of in the phase of our life where we're in it all, and we're definitely helping innovate and helping push the world forward, it's definitely a process for us in a way where you guys are coming into this all right now fresh. So this will be your memory when you're our age, and so I think we're going to be watching you a lot, and I think the idea of entrepreneurialism, that was a word that really started to emerge, I think, in Tessa and I's generation. And I certainly have had that career, absolutely, and sort of made my own path. And I now teach at NYU, at a division of NYU that's a pop music program, that's a music entrepreneurship program. It's not a performance program. It's the Clive Davis Institute of Music. And that's very much the thing right now. So I would tell you, definitely do that because you're of the generation that's like coming into that. But I think in like a more philosophical lens, I'll be interested to see what happens once you guys are our age, because at that point, between us and you guys, we might have built enough new systems that the generation after that is sort of more in lanes. But right now we're blowing up all of the lanes left and right everywhere for so many different reasons, you know, and you guys are coming into that. So I would say, yeah, you like stay light on your feet. The more things you're interested in, the better. Diversify your portfolio, all of those things for sure. And then we'll see where it all lands in like 20 years or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, I used to be, I mean, some days I still am, like, just be a little frustrated by how much is asked of the artist these days. Even for instance, I felt like I made it at one moment when I got to hire, you know, a PR person to sort of help me with some promotional material. And then this person, when we, like early on when we started working together, was like, well, you're so great with social media, just post this. And I was like, oh, so I just hire you to tell me, yeah, that's good. And like, thanks so much. That's $2,000, you know? And I was just like, okay, you know, and we, I think with our creative minds as musicians, we do those things very well, but the advantage of all that now, and especially very recently now, we all are recording engineers too, right? Because we all have that stuff at home. But this was actually a conversation I was just having with James Ennis, who's here, and he was saying, you know, with this great reset for all of us, there's this momentum that has stopped for everyone. But I think that now with this facility that we have to be able to post things on YouTube, we have our own PR machines with Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or whatever you're using, that you can put out into the world whatever you want to be seen doing and whatever you want to be doing in the future. And Michael and I talk about this all the time, and it sometimes is as simple as putting something out into the world if you want to do it. I don't know how many times I've seen amazing artists kind of sit there and just hope or wait for somebody to ask them to do something they've always wanted to do. But because we're asked to do so many things, we actually have the skills to do whatever we want. So I would say in this moment, it's actually an amazing advantage to don't wait to be asked, you know, I mean, if you're a violinist and you want to play, I don't know, Korngold violin concerto, I bet there's some really amazing way to do it at home and create a recording and sort of just put that energy out into the air, or make your own music, or start your podcast, you know, or create a look or whatever, vision board or something on your platforms. It's an amazing time to create who you want to be and have people see you the way you want to be seen.
That is such great advice. Jazmín, do you have any advice for our viewers? And I think that'll probably close us out.
A resounding echo of "don't wait to be asked." I love that so much, and I think is so. I see that a lot. I see that a lot in my students who are, you know, who because they have so many opportunities that they think that the opportunity to do that thing that they've been wanting to do will naturally arise. But the more initiative you can take to make those things a reality, and you know, taking hold of your own destiny and knowing that if you're acting true to yourself, like those things will come, you know, keep going.
True to yourself. I love that so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tessa, Michael, Jazmín, Leah, Anthony, who's working behind the scenes, thank you guys so much. This has been an incredible conversation. It's been an honor to get to know you a little bit more, and I look forward to working with you all again in the future. Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone tuning in. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks all.
Bye.